You all know that we love products that manage to combine form and function, something very few companies in hi-fi or home theater manage to pull off. I mean, apart from Bang & Olufsen's BeoVision Harmony, I don't think I've come across anything quite like the Canvas. And while it functions a little bit like a soundbar, the Canvas aims to give you a more hi-fi stereo experience, like what you would get from a pair of two-way powered speakers, but in a single chassis. Underneath its speaker grille, you'll find two roughly 1-inch silk dome tweeters and two 6.5-inch paper cone woofers. Now, it also has two passive radiators, not to mention 4 Class D amps with a total power of 250 watts, all of which combine for a reported frequency response of 30 Hz to 20 kHz. Now, listening to music and movies through the Canvas can be done via HDMI with eARC, optically with an adapter, a single analog connection, again, adapted, or wirelessly using AirPlay 2, Google Cast, Roon, Tidal, Spotify Connect, or just a network connection. Now, there is room to hide wires and other third-party peripherals on the back of the mount, say for example an Apple TV or a Sonos port, which is a really nice touch. Now, the Canvas can be set up just about anywhere in your room as an all-in-one hi-fi music speaker, or it can double as your TV's floor stand or as a wall mount, giving your TV a high-fidelity sound system. Now, whether or not you want to use it just for music or with your TV, all of the hardware and accessories needed to set up the Canvas are included, making this a very flexible system that works with any flat panel TV up to 77 inches in size, either on its floor stand or mounted to your wall. Since we don't review many smaller TVs, I wasn't sure how to really talk about the Canvas beyond how it compared to our all-in-one speakers like our Bang & Olufsen A9 or Balance. But when LG's new B4 OLED arrived for review, the LG's 65-inch size let me use the Canvas's included TV mount, which is kind of like a spine that bolts to the top of the speaker and is compatible with any VESA mount compliant TV. Finally, this let me see what the Canvas was all about. Now, with many TVs, the Canvas will sit entirely flush, creating a more seamless look between the speaker and your TV. And since the top edge of the Canvas's front grille is made from an IR transparent dark polycarbonate, allowing your remote to work through it. That said, some TVs, like the B4 seen here, may have IR sensors that protrude more than others, which may create or force you to have a very minor gap between the speaker and the TV. Regardless, this is one of the most stylish and just comprehensive plug-and-play lifestyle home theaters that I think I've ever seen. With a single HDMI cable connected between them, the Canvas will take over your TV's speakers and let you enjoy music and movies using the TV's built-in apps or a streamer, like say an Apple TV 4K. Now, one feature the Canvas does have in common with some soundbars is its built-in room correction. You can use your phone's built-in microphone, which is really handy, or you can buy the optional Zen wireless microphone to carry out the room correction procedure. Regardless of the method you choose, you will need to pair your device to the Canvas using its app in order to carry out the measurements and see its results. Canvas's room correction, now it's going to focus mostly on the bass and lower mid-range frequencies, and it stops right around 1,000 Hz, which is kind of right smack dab in the middle of the mid-range. The process, now it takes about 30 seconds to a minute, and this really is going to depend on how long you want to give the Canvas time to map your room by walking around with your phone or the Zen microphone, letting it get the most complete sonic picture. From there, Canvas automatically applies its correction. It really is that simple. Now, if you're wondering which microphone produces the best results, after testing both, the Zen mic is the more refined and accurate with respect to its results, and I was able to cross-check this using my UMic 1 in Room EQ Wizard. Using the phone worked, and it does produce a similar experience, but if you are one that just has to have the best of the best, I think the Zen mic will give you that peace of mind. Now, when it comes to making further adjustments, though, the Canvas is sadly limited. You can toggle room correction on and off, but you can't adjust it. There are no EQ settings or presets, only a single bass tone control, which honestly, I left in the default setting of 0 because I just didn't feel that bass was an area where the Canvas was lacking. Now, real quick before I get to my thoughts on the Canvas's sound, I can sense some of you already have kind of your cursor hovering over the send button on your comment about how you just can't enjoy stereo imaging from a soundbar or a speaker like the Canvas. Now, soundbars typically use multiple drivers, many of which are going to be pointed to the side and up towards your ceiling that, when combined with digital signal processing, or DSP, can create the sensation of a stereo image, or better yet, surround sound, even if no surround speakers are present. Now, Canvas, it doesn't do this. It has no side or upward firing speakers. Instead, it relies on Bach 3D. Bach 3D stands for Band Assembled Crosstalk Cancellation Hierarchy, and in a nutshell, it cancels out the sound waves that cross between a pair of left and right speakers as you start to move them closer together, which is going to muddy stereo imaging and surround sound-like sound fields. Bach 3D ensures that your right ear only hears the right speaker drivers and that the left ear only hears the left drivers. Now, this opens up the perceivable soundstage, creating a far less monaural experience, which I'm sure is what a lot of you expect when you look at a speaker like the Canvas. Now, I will say there is always an adjustment period when you go from, say, a traditional stereo speaker setup to a soundbar-like product. Now, the first thing that you typically notice when listening to a speaker like the Canvas is just how strong the center focus of any piece of music really is. And the fact that you can literally see a loudspeaker in the center, it's going to cause your brain to want to trap the sound right there. But the Canvas's lower stature, which keeps it somewhat out of view, is going to allow your brain to stop focusing on what it's seeing. And within about 30 seconds, provided you don't just look down too often, the center focus sound of the Canvas fades and is replaced by a more traditional stereo one. In a lot of ways, it's not too different from what I experienced when I listened to our Klipsch Heresy 4s. Engaging Bach 3D, I noticed that the Canvas's overall sound or tone was incredibly reminiscent of Bang & Olufsen's A9 out-of-the-box sound. I mean, it's clean, very clear, almost to the point of unnaturally crisp or precise, with a level of just that start-stop immediacy that is just very, very difficult to achieve with passive loudspeakers and separate amplifiers. Ultimately, I recommend that you do leave Bach 3D on for the most spacious sound possible, and the result is a neutral sound, one that is so uncolored and focused that other speakers are going to sound a little bit veiled or maybe even muddy by comparison. For example, Dominic Fils-Aimé's Birds. It's a great track to listen to when judging vocals, mid-range clarity, and dynamics. Through the Canvas, Dominique was front and center, with a presence that took about a step forward of either the LG or our Sony screen. Now, as I turned up the volume, Dominique didn't grow in size or become more of a vocal wall. She stayed true to life in her placement, but her impact, inflection, and again, that presence, it just intensified. Now, at about the 1 minute mark of Birds, Dominique's self-harmonies, they appear out of nowhere off to the right and left side of center where no speaker exists. Her harmonies are so vividly rendered that they sounded as good or as defined as I've heard from a pair of bookshelf speakers like, say, the SVS Nanos or B&W 600 Series S3. During this demo, the lateral soundstage of the Canvas easily spanned to 10 to 13 feet in perceivable width, with the track's more ethereal sounds like the birds flapping left to right and overhead stretching well beyond that. The double bass throughout the track, it was plucky and immediate. There was a level of dynamic snap that is hard for passive speakers to replicate unless we're talking about speaker amp combos that reach well into the 5-figure range. What was missing, though, was this organic sense of air and decay. I mean, pull hard on a bass string or hit the lowest note on a piano, even really quickly, and the sound is naturally, it's going to build, it's going to peak, and then it's going to trail off to nothing. With the Canvas, bass notes have a millisecond of rise. They definitely peak, and they hit better than almost any speaker I've heard at or near this price, but they fade almost as quickly. This makes for an incredibly nuanced, articulate, and detailed performance, one that is just crazy intelligible up and down the speaker's response, but one that can take a little bit getting used to, as it's unlike any passive speaker performance you've probably heard. Now, I like it, though I admit it's not wholly natural sounding at first. Because the Canvas is so controlled, so composed, and more or less linear or neutral through the bass and mid-range, after running its room calibration, it plays nice with a wide range of musical genres and recording qualities, from, call it small ensemble jazz to harder popular rock. I listened to Linkin Park's new single, Heavy is the Crown, with the volume set to 80, with peaks well into the mid 90 dB range, and the canvas absolutely slayed. Our entire 20-foot span of our front wall, it was just filled with sound, with the outermost edges sounding as or more defined than most speakers that hover around this speaker's asking price. Now, switching my focus to movies, I use the canvas while watching films through various streaming apps as well as high bitrate copies downloaded to the Kaleidoscape Strato V. Now, one of my go-to demos is Top Gun Maverick, and while the less compressed signal from the K-Scape, it definitely improved the sensation of surround sound coming from the canvas. You need to understand, the canvas is not a surround sound system. There are no surround speakers or even reflective ones inside the canvas, so don't expect to hear Maverick's plane flying by or overhead or travel to the back of your room. Now, before you click off, that isn't to say that you don't get a spacious, near surround sound-like presentation with the canvas. When watching Top Gun, Alien, Ghostbusters Afterlife, the canvas easily matched the visuals on screen, even one as large as our 98-inch Sony TV. Dialogue, as you would expect, front and center, and it emanated from the center of the screen. While there are no dialogue aid or enhancements, dialogue is just naturally clear, which is bound to appeal to a lot of you purists out there. To test this speaker's spatial chops, I pulled up the Are You a God scene in Ghostbusters Afterlife. The growl coming from the demon dogs, followed by the crack of lightning and thunder, is an absolute torture test for both low bass and Atmos effects and dynamics. This scene was surprisingly impactful, but the canvas came up short in two areas: absolute bass extension and just overall scale. And while the lightning and thunder had terrific snap and that initial punch, the bass really does roll off just after 30 hertz. Being able to add a subwoofer, it would have added more dimension and made me feel like I was just in the center of the scene's chaos. When it comes to scale, I'm used to the lightning moving along our ceiling and dropping down just right of screen. With the canvas, it extended to maybe 6 or 7 feet overhead. It definitely got to the top of our TV, but it never reached the top of our 10-foot ceiling. Its placement to the right of the screen where no speaker exists, though, that was bang on, but there is a limit to how physically high, the canvas can place sound, at least when used on its floor mount. The canvas is pretty adept at playing back both music and movies. I know I enjoyed it, but there are ways that the canvas could be better, and it starts with the I/O board. The input-output options are limited and kind of cramped. I'm sure the designers would prefer that everyone just use the canvas with an HDMI connection or a wireless one, which is totally fine. Only the HDMI port is somewhat difficult to access and may not allow enough room for every HDMI cable on the market. The optical port will require the use of an adapter, and the same goes for the sole analog connection. Given the size of this speaker, I'm not sure why the I/O board is just so small. When it comes to the app, Canvas is off to a good but not great start. Going off appearances alone, the Canvas is going to be compared to Bang & Olufsen, but even looking at other brands, a better overall just graphic interface and user experience is necessary in order for Canvas to be competitive. And if you're going after hi-fi customers, I think most expect the ability to save user settings and just have more control over the speaker's response beyond room correction and bass tone controls. Speaking of room correction, another thing customers are going to expect is to have the best tools for the job included, especially at this price point. So Canvas, please consider including the wireless microphone with purchase rather than expecting customers to pay an additional $150 when they've spent close to $4,000 already. Lastly, I gotta say, I applaud Canvas for offering different covers for this speaker. The design fan in me really appreciates the ability to switch things up depending on, say, the size of your TV or just your room's decor. The wood slat cover is one of the more elevated looks, but its edges are as sharp as knives, and they will cut you if you accidentally brush against them. Canvas, I hope you consider rounding the edges to avoid accidents, especially for people with small children and pets. Now, when it comes to comparisons, there aren't a lot of products like the Canvas on the market. Ones that are equal parts hi-fi speaker, home theater system, but that also function as furniture. The three products that manage to fall kind of into this camp are Bang & Olufsen's Biosound Stage, the Theater, and A9. Starting with the A9, as a standalone speaker, the Canvas is better at stereo imaging than a single A9, and as a result, it may entice some hi-fi enthusiasts to go ahead and give the Canvas a go. You can mount the Canvas to a wall or place it atop a sturdy shelf or cabinet for a more traditional hi-fi presentation. And in that respect, at least when focusing solely on sound quality, the Canvas is beyond competitive. The A9 is, in my opinion, a little bit more stylish and functional as a more ambient or whole home listening speaker. B&O's ecosystem on a whole, it's just more fleshed out and the user experience is more refined. But if I needed a stylish solution for both music and movies, I would definitely choose the Canvas over the A9. But if I was looking for a music-only solution and a stereo-like performance from a single speaker wasn't too high on my list of priorities, I'd choose the A9. I like how easy it is to just kind of pick up and go, making moving it from room to room super easy. Plus, the A9 sounds great. At just over 11 grand, the Theater is a true all-in-one 7-channel Atmos home theater soundbar. The Theater definitely has more to offer than the Canvas in terms of inputs and user customization. That said, in going over my notes from our Theater review, I'm not convinced its sound quality would outright embarrass the Canvas. While the Theater may give you a slightly greater sense of 3D-like surround sound, you are paying almost 3 times more for it. If you spec the B&O with its optional floor stand, making it a little bit more Canvas-like, the price jumps even higher. The Theater is exceptional, but the Canvas is a better value, and honestly, the speaker I would buy in this head-to-head. But for me, where the rubber meets the road is when I start to compare the Canvas to Bang & Olufsen's BO Soundstage Soundbar. You guys know I love this stage, and like the Canvas, it is equally good at music and movies. Unlike the Canvas, though, the stage has reflective speakers that can deliver a slightly more immersive and spacious sound, though it doesn't have the bass or just absolute volume and dynamic chops of the Canvas. So these two things, they sort of cancel each other out. True, the stage cannot be used as a stand, nor can it visually expand if it TVs up to 77 inches, but all that said, for about half the price, the stage remains competitive, especially if you know you're not going to crank the volume to 11 or need bass that is likely going to result in, a neighbor noise complaint. So this one for me, it comes down to just an individual use case because I really do love them both. Now, obviously, the elephant in the room is the striking resemblance the Canvas has to the Bang & Olufsen BO Vision Harmony. The Harmony is going to set you back a cool 26 grand, and that's just its starting price. Now, I have not been able to demo the Harmony outside of a showroom, so I'm not about to speculate as to which product is better. The Harmony is designed to work within the Bang & Olufsen ecosystem, so if you're not as heavily steeped in the B&O lifestyle, the Canvas appears to be a great way to enjoy a bit of that vibe, but for a lot less money. As for how the Canvas compares to traditional soundbars, like say Sonos's Arc, Samsung's Q990D, or some of these new hybrid setups like Sony's Theater Quad, it's not really a fair comparison. Not to say that the Canvas isn't great, it is, but more traditional soundbar setups, especially ones that utilize, separate surround speakers and dedicated subwoofers, they're just gonna have an easier time pulling off the illusion that you have a more discreet and dedicated home theater setup compared to the Canvas. But here's why the Canvas is still relevant. Not everyone wants a full home theater or a speaker system that requires multiple boxes to be, placed around their room. And while soundbars have definitely cut down on clutter, they can't hold a candle to something like the Canvas. So when it comes to absolute fidelity and just coherent, near full range sound, no soundbar can touch the Canvas either. So that is it. That is my in-depth look at the new Canvas. What do you guys think? I know we teased it in last week's LG episode, but I gotta know, now that you've seen the full review, what do you think of the Canvas? Go ahead, sound off down in the comments below. And if I missed something, a comparison, or you just want more information, also leave it down below. You never know. Could end up in next week's Unplugged, where we find out what Christy thought of the Canvas. Until then, if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead, ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links that Christy's left for you down below, know that that's a great way that you've continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we both do here. And both of us, thank you very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile, and that is it for me today. So remember, The only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on Friday with a brand new video. Bye.